Hello there, I'm Joshua Noble, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the military draft. But before we get into that, I'm going to explain to you what exactly the military draft is, if you haven't heard of it before. I'm sure you've heard the term draft before, especially if you're a football fan. But for those of you who don't know what the draft is, allow me to give a brief explanation. The military draft is when the country feels the need for more members in their armed forces. As a result, they require men to be called into action from their daily lives to meet the proper requirements. We used to have a draft, and we had a draft in 5 wars. We had a draft in the American Revolution, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. The Cold War includes the Vietnam and Korean War. The draft was put into an end when the armed forces moved to an all-volunteer army. However, the SSS, which stands for the Selective Service System, remains in place as a backup plan. The SSS requires citizens between the ages of 15 and 18, only male citizens though, to register so a draft can be resumed if it is needed. If you wanted to attend college before the draft, then you would have to be a member of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, or ROTC for short. However, if you fail or drop out of the ROTC, then you must be drafted right then and there. You must enlist right then and there. There are many reasons the draft should be kept during a time of military action, but I'm only going to discuss 3 main reasons that I think that are the most important, such as training for everyone who enlisted, which increases the national security, the extra supply of a force during a war, and the availability of seasoned soldiers for wars to come. I'm going to start off with training increases national security. Imagine this. A world war breaks out, and we end up running low on troops. Our government issues the draft once again. We'd send the majority of eligible men to basic training. Basic training is before you go into combat, you learn all the basics about weapons, hand-to-hand combat, etc. This would give them the knowledge of how to defend themselves and others in sticky situations. Imagine this. You're walking through a Walmart one day, and some guy has a gun, and he's holding people at gunpoint or shooting people. If you have military knowledge, or knowledge of weapons, or self-defense, you could easily help and put that to an end. Once these men that have been drafted and go to war return home, a large majority of the country would be able to keep themselves and others out of dangerous situations, which means the rate of crime and successful crime would most definitely decrease. Israel requires all men and women of age to serve in a military for a certain amount of years. They do this in order to keep a sense of national security very high. They are surrounded by enemies that would strike them down if given the chance, but due to their civilization's knowledge of war and warfare, it is very hard for other countries to make a move on them. Another main point would be a draft would give us an extra supply of troops during a war. With rising tensions between the US and Russia's allies lately, we are vastly outnumbered in terms of ground troops. Russia has the world's largest physical military, and its allies add greatly to that number. Now, people may argue that we have a better military than Russia, but when I say that Russia has a larger military, I'm talking about ground troops as a physical person. The US does definitely have better technology and stuff like that, but if it was a boots on the ground war, we wouldn't stand a chance, unfortunately. If we were to go to war with Russia, we would most definitely need to increase the size of our military. Russia has about 1,13,000 troops in its active duty service right now, with 2.5 million in reserve. With their reserve, they have about 1 million more troops than we do. This is where a draft would come in handy. Our military would double in size almost instantly with the number of eligible men that we have in our country. Which is why we need to continue the draft. The draft ended in 1973 when we became an all-volunteer military. This means that you only have to serve if you want to. This increases the need for troops. And if we only have people who really want to go into action, then we don't have as many as we possibly can. The draft would ensure that we always have a supply of able men. Another reason would be a draft would ensure a large majority of our troops would gain experience and need for wars to come. People would come back from war with a great amount of knowledge and combat experience, and they'd be able to pass that on to others and teach others to prepare our troops for wars to come. So we would always have the upper hand if we keep that sense of mentality. It's for these three main reasons I hope you agree with me that it is time to bring back the military draft to keep our country safe. There are no reasons not to make the military draft mandatory nowadays. Our enemies are growing their forces and requiring more troops from their countries, as well as having their demands met. The U.S., however, is sitting idly by and not growing our militaries, which puts us at a disadvantage. A draft would ensure that we have enough troops to keep us a formidable opponent to our enemies. Give the young men of our nation experience for wars and conflicts to come, and keep our homeland safe. Hopefully, I have convinced you that we need to have the military draft to keep us safe, because it is something that the U.S. will need in the future to survive with the growing tensions that everybody has. With these three main points, I hope that you take them to heart and really think about them, about how we need to keep the military draft in effect. Thank you very much for listening.